In this episode of Speech 1315 Public Speaking, we will be going over Chapter 12, Outlining the Speech. So let's get started. First and foremost, what is an outline? It is essentially the blueprint of your speech. I will go through what the presentation has said with this, but I will also interject some of my pro tips on how to create your outline and how to brainstorm. And you'll also see examples of what I'm expecting when it comes to the outline. But ultimately, an outline is kind of like your roadmap for your public speech. It is an aid for organization. So let's say your topic is eating disorders. It helps you organize the order in which you want to talk about things, right? Do you want to talk about anorexia before bulimia or bulimia before anorexia? It just is a good roadmap for you, and it helps remind you of where you're going with the speech. Now, with outlining, this is not a word for word essay. You are not doing that because that would be boring. Essentially, an outline is a roadmap. So there are different ways you can do it. You can do sentence by sentence. I personally like to do sentence by sentence because I use my outline to practice with before transitioning it into notes, which I'll discuss here a little bit more in a minute. But just please note that an outline is not a 3-page essay. It is more bullet points, it's subheaders, and it's just notes that help you start to formulate your speech. Some advantages of an outline is an outline helps you see structure and the relationship between ideas. So let's say, for example, I'm giving a speech on eating disorders. And at first, I want to talk about the psychology behind eating disorders, the different types of eating disorders, and the future of eating disorders. Well, what if I first put future of eating disorders off the bat? That's the first subsection I'm going to talk about. It'd be a little bit confusing, not only for the audience members, but for me when I'm talking about it, unless there was a specific reason for why I chose that order. But typically, why would I talk about the future of eating disorders at the beginning and not the end? So it just helps you structure out the relationship between your ideas and helps you streamline them. The 3 steps I encourage you to follow when creating your outline is 1, create said outline. Just take a rough draft stab at it and try it. And then after you create your outline, you prepare your speaking notes. And then the 3rd step is you deliver your speech. When creating an outline, it's important to have these subheadings. So for example, if you're having a speech about guarding against online thieves, like I said, you want subheadings. That's what these things are called right here, where you give an overview of what you're going to be talking about. So if, for example, this is my outline, this is how I would create my speaking notes on a Post-it note. I might say, protect yourself. You can do this through security software, secure sites, and attachments from strangers. As you can see, it somewhat correlates with the outline. So that is where you get your speaking notes. And then the 3rd part is delivering your speech. Why not use an outline while speaking? 1, it's often too many words and you will lose your place on the page. Secondly, 2, if you're not a pro speaker, it is too tempting to just read off the page. When you have it in your hand, why not use it as a crutch? I think it's a subconscious thing, honestly, because I've tried doing it too, and I just end up using it as a crutch. And it's actually better to not use it because, for example, this individual with this white paper in their hand, if they have the white paper up to their face, you can't see their nonverbals. You lose eye contact when reading off of the page, and it's not as personable. So it's really important to be mindful of how you practice. But just always remember that, sorry, did I go too far? Yes. When outlining, just always remember that when it comes time to writing an outline, you don't want one with too many words, and you don't want to use it when presenting because you'll have a temptation to read off of it. How is an outline different from the actual speech? So the outline is basically just the bare bones, the skeletons. It's just bullet points essentially of your ideas and what you want to say. So for example, we have to do a special occasion speech in this course. When it comes to outlining, it's more of a brainstorming dump. I say when it comes time to brainstorming, I recommend just putting down as much content on a page because it's a lot easier to delete than to come up with content. So put it all down on the page and then start editing that outline. And then once you have that outline as a good roadmap, you can actually start practicing the speech, and you can start adding transition and adding words. If I wrote down every single word I was going to say in a speech, A, it's super hard to memorize it. B, it's important to be able to extemporaneously present, which basically means having a casual conversation. So for example, in this presentation, I didn't write down every single word that I was going to say, but obviously I'm adding in stuff as it's flowing, and it's more conversational, which hopefully is more appeasing than if I just was talking in a monotone voice and was reading off of a teleprompter. Here are some guidelines for choosing an outline or creating an outline. There are two different formats, essentially. There's the topic-based one, and there's the complete sentence. I personally like a blend between the two. I feel like it helps me understand where my thoughts were. So for example, if I'm talking about space rocks and I'm talking about asteroids, if I just wrote this down and I didn't put the notes associated with what I wanted to say about asteroids, 3 weeks from now, I would not remember what my goal was. So I always add the topic and then a complete sentence underneath it. And that's what I would recommend for you as well. You can use standard subdivisions. So for example, the Roman numerals 1 might be the overarching idea, and then A and B might be subcategories. So for example, if my main topic is to discuss the psychology behind eating disorders, my first topic might be bulimia, and my second might be anorexia. And I might talk about in A, the psychology behind bulimia, and B, the future of it. And I'll have subcategories with sentences of what I actually want to say about each section. Avoid single subdivisions. So this is not what I recommend. I don't recommend you only having, bulimia, psychology of bulimia, and then just 1 and 2. You need to have other stuff underneath it. Otherwise, it's just going to, again, just be a big block of text, and that's not what you want. There are various parts associated with an outline. I will give a template associated with this course, but essentially you come up with your title and you come up with your objectives. So what is the general purpose and specific idea that you're trying to go for with this speech? Remember, it should always have the audience members in mind. You will then have an introduction that will have some type of attention getter. This is a great place to brainstorm different attention getters and write them down. You will then have a transition. Transition sentences are super important because it helps link one idea to another idea. So for example, if I'm talking about eating disorders and I talk about bulimia, it would be weird for me to just end a sentence about bulimia and then just be like, so anorexia. You need to have a clear transition between why you're talking about bulimia and then anorexia. So for example, I might say, however, being bulimic isn't the only form of eating disorder that an individual can have. In fact, some individuals can be anorexic. Let's take a deeper look into what anorexia really is. That transitions into the next content within the body of the paragraph, or the next section within the outline. The body of the paragraph is essentially your main points with, again, transitions between each of them. You have another transition into your conclusion, and then you need to document your outline by providing bibliography or any visual aids that you will be using within your speech. A bibliography is essentially a reference section. You should not have information in here that you cannot cite. Everything needs to be truthful and have a source. So parts of the outline, like I said, there's a title, purpose, central idea, introduction, conclusion, body, transitions, a bibliography, and then visual aids. When you're creating your speaking notes, here's one option that you have for creating them. You can have an introduction, you can have it in different colors, look at audience slow, or you can have option 2 where you don't have some of those key nuance details about Lockheed Martin, Sunnyvale, California. It can just be a little bit more bullet point if you'd like. Essentially, you can make your note cards however you want, and it may take a couple of times of practicing through your speech to figure out, okay, what do I really need on my note card and what is fluff? What can I get rid of? What am I continuously forgetting? You name it, but your note cards are unique to you. You can use a full sheet of paper, like I said, but always just be mindful. I don't recommend it, but be mindful of where is it at? How is it bullet pointed on the document? Is it an essay, which I don't recommend? I would recommend bullet point if you're going to use a full white piece of paper. You can also use visual aids as prompts. So this is what I tend to like to do is the visual aids remind me of what I'm supposed to say. And that way I'm not reliant on a note card or a piece of paper, because even with note cards for me personally, I'll get jumbled with them and I'll say like, oh, did I not move that one? Or I'll look down at it and it like makes me stumble. Whereas if I just have a visual aid associated with my PowerPoint, I'm able to move forward. Again, notes is totally up to the speaker, but I recommend having one of these options. And like I said, you can use electronic devices, so you can use your phone. My biggest tip with using your phone is just make sure that it's on do not disturb if you're in the middle of a speech. The worst is to be reading, again, kind of a bullet pointed list off of your phone and you get a text message or a phone call. It's disruptive to the speech. So just be mindful of where you're at, the context, and put your phone on do not disturb. With controlling your material, it's important to revise your outline and notes whenever they need alterations. So I kind of hinted at this a minute ago, but with your, for example, your notes, constantly revise them to be up to date with the status of your speaking capability. What do I mean by this? When you practice your speech for the first time, you may be really reliant on your notes. But let's say by the 5th time you're presenting, you're like, oh, I got that one section down. Like I almost have it like, it's flowing really well. I kind of have it memorized. You might take that whole index card and just throw it away or save it for later or just use it as a just in case method. Similarly, with your outline, you may need to revise it. So let's say you're in the middle of presenting your speech and you're like, man, I just feel like it would make more sense if I talked about anorexia before bulimia in my eating disorder speech. Then I would recommend moving them and revising your outline to adjust and accommodate for that switch. I also recommend testing out your outline. What you can do is you can just have a general conversation with your buddy. I will sometimes call a friend and I'll just say like, this is what I'm thinking about the flow of the speech. Does it make sense? If they're like, why would you talk about XYZ before ABC? Then that's a clear sign that you may need to switch something within your speech. Revise for continuity. Silly me. Sorry, it's been a long day. But revise, like I said, for continuity. Also make deletions if you are in danger of exceeding your time limit. Again, you're just always controlling your material and making sure that it's not repetitive, making sure that it's clear, it's concise, and that it's within those time limits. And then here are just a few tips for outlining, creating outlines for your career. When there is no time limit is set, speak briefly. So let's say that you have to give a speech in 5 minutes. Your boss just came in and said, I need you to go. I would recommend to not ramble and keep it brief and keep it memorable. So it would be better for you to keep the speech around 5 to 7 minutes than for you to ramble for 18 minutes. Always be mindful of said time limit if there is one, but obviously when there's no time limit, I recommend speaking briefly. My second tip is decide how you will reveal your sources. So you don't want to make a statement saying like orange juice will cure cancer. What source do you have off of that? Where are you getting that information? Some people that I recommend one of two ways. One, you can add it into your speech in a very subtle way. So you could say, according to a recent 2024 study conducted by Dr. John Marshall, who studies cures for cancer, he found that orange juice could be a potential cure for it. I now know that the source is Dr. John Marshall and that it's a recent study in 2024. And if I really wanted to go figure out what that study was, I could see it in your bibliography or your reference section. If you don't state it directly in the speech, you need to have a reference section that you provide to your audience members so that they can follow along with it. But there are a lot of different ways to cite and source your information and a lot of unique ways of how you can reveal those sources to your audience members. So you can get creative with that as well. But ultimately, a huge tip for your career is always reveal your sources. So that way people can follow along with you, and it'll also show that you're very credible on what you're talking about. With that being said, that is the outlining portion of public speaking speech 1315. I will add a tip in that wasn't discussed within the slides is brainstorming. Brainstorming for your outline can be kind of tough. I recommend a couple of different options. I'll give you two. One is the write it out method. Some people can get really stuck with writing. Set a timer for 15 minutes and just write. Just don't stop writing or typing. Even if you write and 1,000 times over and over and over again within the 15 minutes, do it, because there is psychological research that has shown that just the act of typing will help the cognitive flow of ideas and will help you come up with something to write quicker than if you just sat here and didn't write. My other tip for brainstorming what you want to talk about is Post-it notes. So sometimes it's really hard for me personally to type out what I want to say in an outline. I recommend just getting some Post-it notes and writing down main ideas. And then that way I can move the ideas around. And then once I'm like, okay, this is the flow of what I want to say in my speech, then I transition my Post-it notes and what I've written on them over to my outline. And I'm like, okay, this is the order of the topic I want to talk about, or the order of how I want to talk about each topic. Now let me add in my credible sources and my content to support my ideas. Also, with outlining, it's important to do claim, data, warrant. What does this mean? If you have and I'll reiterate this in other videos, but if you make a claim like orange juice can help cure cancer, that's a claim. You're claiming that orange juice can cure cancer. Data is any information that supports that notion. That's when you can lead into saying something like, according to a recent study at Johns Hopkins University, they found XYZ. Warrant is you saying, based on this data, this supports my claim. This is obviously going to be something that we work out throughout the semester, and I'll talk a little bit more within the informative and persuasive speech chapters, but this is something that you can already start implementing into your outlining process and get the flow of it going. So if you get in the habit of writing in claim, data, warrant format, it'll make the rest of the course go by a lot easier. Well, that is my presentation on chapter 12's portion of the book on outlining. If you have any questions, please email me. And this week you will be doing something with an outline, some type of homework or some type of assignment. So please use this chapter to help you throughout the remainder of the week. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.